engineering faculty. We wanted our students to gain actual design experience, but to also gain something so much deeper, gain appreciation for different cultures, for a geography and a landscape that is different from ours, just to gain a deeper appreciation for the world outside of the Panhandle of Texas. We wanted them to use their engineering skills that they have been developing for the last few years in an actual application, and we wanted it to be human-centered. So we wanted them to be conducting projects that mattered, and not just mattered to them because they could feel good about a design, but mattered in the sense that it actually had an impact. It was helping people, and it would continue on. It wasn't a one and done kind of project. This trip really gave us the ability to integrate that more into our curriculum and to leave that impression with the students, and which has already spread to new classes of students, that this is kind of what we do here.
We're training these students to like another generation of engineers that it's going to be different than engineering has been in the past. So from an undergraduate experience, especially in the way that these students will impact the engineering world, it's really important. And it's unique to us, I would say.
Made a phone call to my friend in Honduras, Marlon, and said, my wife's an engineering professor and would like to go and implement some of these projects. Do you think it's something that we can do? And so he said yes, and so we started planning.
We started thinking immediately about doing something more service learning style, but also wanting it to be real engineering.
We started with these people in Honduras, with this village that two of our students had been before as part of a readership program their freshman year, and so they were familiar with the area. And so we started by asking, the people, what do you need? I think what it turns into is, can we come and do something, and would that be useful to you? And so they have a generator that they were using for electricity, but they could only run it for an hour each night, and it's very intrusive. So they said electricity is something that we need help with. And then the water is plentiful. However, the water that's not cleaned. And then one of the main reasons that we were going is that we already knew that education in these rural villages was scarce. That's something that we knew from the beginning that we wanted to do, is construct a school while we were there.
We worked on ideas for 6 months or so before we started the class, and then the class time for 3 months in the spring semester was spent studying the language, studying the culture, studying the geography and the people, and then going through the design process.
Traditionally, in an engineering class, you are given a problem statement. So design this system given all of these parameters and constraints. And so they know how to use equations and problem solving to then come up with a solution. So what we were doing in this class was very different, because we were saying, okay, we want to design a system to clean water. And we don't really know much about it. We don't really know much about the village. We don't know about the water supply. We don't know what kind of space you might have to work with there. Everything basically is an unknown. And for engineering students, especially when this is your first experience with that blows your mind.
When we didn't really know what to expect, we were just making assumptions based upon small pieces of information that we could gather. In developing the projects themselves, you come to learn that details are very, very important, which in this instance we were just designing and building projects while we were trying to imagine where we were going to implement this. And that was a big, I think, overwhelming experience, trying to design something with an objective that we weren't sure of at that time.
This is transformative for an engineer, to all of a sudden be able to operate in a place where everything's not given to you, and you have to design the problem yourself and design the solution yourself. And these guys rose to the challenge. And by the end of the semester, we had a functioning hydroelectric generation system. We had everything in place, the design, the structure for the school, and we had everything ready for the water filtration system.
We worked all semester long working on these projects, designing them, reworking them, trying to figure out the best way to make them work, but also to make them transportable so where we can bring them down there, and then renewable to where it's not going to last for a week and then break down on them down there. Flexibility was the word of the trip. Had to be flexible on how we would redesign it there with whatever resources we had while we were there.
I said, you need everything that you need to bring with you, and it needs to go in these foot lockers. And you should have seen the looks on the students' faces when I told them that. You know, they thought, what? But they're engineers, and so they said, yes, we can do that.
We told them, okay, whatever you design has to go into these 3-foot by 2-foot tubs, and we can only take 16, and they might make it and they might not. So there you go. Every design that we had could be broken down into very small components that could also be replaced at a hardware store in Tegucigalpa if everything didn't get there. The week before is a blur because there was just so many late nights and so many redesigns and rebuilds, and remember they had to then disassemble everything and pack it into tubs that we could ship and that would actually make it through as checked baggage, because when you start looking at it, so many things that we use and take for granted, you can't send it. So there's different types of epoxies we were using. It turns out that most of what we use is extremely flammable. The students had to be very creative in these last minute redesigns. Again, such a valuable thing for them to learn. I don't think that they will ever design a system again and not think about every component that they're using. What type of epoxy do I use? How would I clean this system? If I have to replace this part, where would that come from? And is it easily replaceable, or is it such a critical part of the system that everything fails if this part fails? We show up at the airport and there are 16 of us, and there are 16 of these huge foot lockers that we're taking, and then everybody else has their backpacks and their other bags, and we were quite a scene for sure.
Just landing in Tegucigalpa is an adventure. When you land the plane in Honduras, it's a very interesting landing because it's a small runway, and it's built on in this valley area. So you come over this mountain and you fly by a shanty town, and then you make this hard left bank, and you turn sideways where the plane's sitting like this, and you're looking down at the runway thinking, that's where we're going to land, and then you shoot down straight into the runway, bounce a few times and hit the brakes. That's the first adventure.
The travel scenario was very unique. It was, you might say, uncomfortable, but we were briefed on that extensively going in, so all of us knew exactly what to expect, and it was exactly that. It was exactly as billed. We were 4 hours on a van down a very rough dirt road, and then 6 hours in a canoe to get to the village.
I mean, as far as the boat ride itself, I mean, that was an adventure for all of us. I think we'll all be talking about it probably to our grandkids someday. And they got us on these long, ridiculously long boats carved from mahogany trees. Never knew trees could even be that long. And we probably had more bulk of items than any of these guys had ever seen, all the stuff that we were bringing.
We didn't necessarily run into anything I wasn't expecting, except for the canoes. I've never even seen a canoe like this before. I wasn't necessarily expecting a 50, 60 foot, 2-person wide canoe.
From the moment we got on that boat, we started taking on water, so we were just sinking.
We were a little too heavy for the first boat that we got on, and so it was, I thought this is going to be the time that I go swimming. About halfway through the trip, we met a group of Hondurans that had taken a boat out for the dry season and had fixed it and repainted it, and they took that boat and put it back in the water and put a motor on the end of it, and we split.
And so we were about 100 yards behind the first boat, and that boat got to see a jaguar, so I'm pretty upset about it.
The river trip was fun for about an hour. It's been such a romantic image in my mind. And then we got on the canoe, and after about an hour, when we passed back Vienna sausages and then washed our hands on those things were okay, but yeah, it was really tedious and it was painful, and it was definitely our first test of, are we tough enough to go to this village and make it for 7 days?
I think the excitement of the trip and the anticipation of what we were going to be doing, and just that we were all in this together, and just the opportunity that was coming along with that made it very worthwhile.
I feel like now, having gotten there, that you couldn't explain it to someone, like what is the big deal about implementing some kind of solution in a place so far away. Just the effort it takes to make it to this place is Herculean. And Marlon, when we finally got to the village, he stood up and was like, "Cola De Cajon," and he was so excited. And we were like, yeah, we really did make it.
We got to Cola De Cajon and hiked, 200-300 yards up the hill with our foot lockers, and we had arrived.
So we see this procession of villagers coming down this very steep rock face. I don't know how else to describe it.
All the villagers came down flip-flops, Crocs, and barefooted. There was not a single real shoe to be seen.
And they're coming down all ages. I mean, little bitty kids are crawling down it barefoot, and then adults are coming down, and they immediately just start taking our stuff.
And they picked up these massive totes, approximately probably 75 to 100 pounds each. They were just stacking them on their backs, going up this huge incline. Like, it was just another day at the office.
And they immediately come down and just envelop us basically and bring us all into the village. I mean, it was really touching, and I think it set the tone for the experience in the village, that they were willing to welcome us right away.
One of the dilemmas we had before we even got there was we didn't exactly tell the villagers what we were bringing to them. They knew we were coming. They knew that we were going to help them build a school building, but we didn't tell them we were bringing them a water filtration system or a hydroelectric generator. So we got there, and to our excitement, they were totally bought into it.
One of the things that I will always remember about that initial experience in Cola De Cajon is the way that everything was different. So the feel, the temperature, the smells, the sights, it was completely different than anything I've seen before. And I feel like that we were all kind of going through that at once. So the church.
Probably not very many professors, faculty have been able to sleep on the tiled floor of a church in the middle of nowhere with a big group of your students.
We stayed in a one-room church.
So there's just one room, changing is difficult, body odor is real.
Never getting to take a shower, a bath.
And we each had a sleeping bag and a mat.
That little 1-inch foam pad of air is such a blessing, right? When you're sleeping on concrete and you have just that little bit of air is so nice.
I think that what saved us during the night is that we were so tired. So we would get up early and push and push and push and push until it was dark, and then we would go to sleep.
What I was so amazed with was how fast some of those kids would go to sleep and start snoring.
And it was a cool bonding experience. You get to hear who all snores during the night.
The snoring was so incredibly loud. I mean, I will never forget how loud that snoring was.
The first project was to build a school. We were building it's actually a 2-room school. There's 45 students that were meeting in this one tiny room. And so the school building team had designed the school, had done all of the calculations for what materials would need to be purchased, and this had actually started about a year in advance of the trip. And so we had been able to purchase in-country those materials and had them sent to the village before we even got there. So there had been some construction done on the school before we got there. And the students spent most of the week actually building the roof truss and putting the roof on and the ceiling on in the school.
I would say the school had a lot more hard work and labor put into it than the other projects did, mainly because it was a construction job basically. Every piece of wood that we used was cut by a chainsaw out of the trees there in the village.
Yeah, so I worked with Marlon and Adonis. Adonis was the village carpenter. Some of the stuff that they did was really impressive. So for example, when we're building the school, I'm scooting along, on the rafters one at a time and trying to nail things in, and they're just jumping all around and throwing hammers around and putting stuff together. And
they had the toughest project because it was in this most beautiful meadow that I've ever seen. but it was, the sun just beat on them all day long. And there wasn't water, it was tough. And they're up on the roof all day long. They were all sunburned and sweating all the time and doing some serious, manual labor.
The tin roof, we knew it was going to be really hot, so I think we all saved a little bit in the tank, and then we busted that out in like 30 minutes because we knew how hot it was going to be just standing up there roasting like rotisserie chickens.
The whole spirit of the place was lively. They were excited to be doing it, happy about the hard work, and learning things along the way. The water filtration project. So this project came about, the student Connor Cope was in my senior design class, and so he worked tirelessly on this system. But I don't know that Connor slept at all the week before we went to Honduras. We knew that they had rivers and streams, but we weren't sure what kind of elevation change we had. We didn't know if we'd have enough pressure to get the water from the source to the actual filtration system. So what happened is this project developed into two projects where we had a group then that was building a water storage system. The team spent a few days assembling the water storage tank, and then Connor worked with the villagers to assemble the water filtration system. He had been kind of planning for how am I going to show them this is really safe and that they can drink it. And so as soon as he had it coming through this filtration system, of course it was like this big scene in the village, and I look over and Connor's drinking out of this hose that's coming out of it, and so it was a good moment, a moment of success, of completion, and really of growth for him. And I would say that project was the spotlight for the village. The school was probably the most useful project for the village. The water filtration system was the crowd pleaser, and the hydroelectric turbine was my very favorite. So this was the project that I got to work the most with, and this design was remarkable. And it's not my design, it was the students' design, and it was completely novel. So they spent so much time learning about different types of systems, turbine systems. How could they recreate it, and then how could they create it to function in this new environment? The students said, well, what if we use the water to produce electricity? Great, how are you going to do that?
We came up with the idea that since they had a river right there by the village, we would build them something that they could stick in the river and produce electricity. And there's things like this that have been made before, but nothing for a third world environment that was cost effective, they'd be able to easily redo parts of it and keep it running, and it would provide stable electricity to the village. So we designed this out of a boat propeller and several other parts that they could easily redo down there.
Another thing that these guys had to consider is that the river where we were placing this turbine, if it's rainy season or dry season, the actual elevation of the river changes by 30 feet. They had to design the electrical system so that it didn't overload the battery bank, but that it was hardy enough, because these are just wires draped from the river to the village. I mean, they had to look at how it interacts with the environment, like what might eat through this, and if that happens, what is the safety then, when we're looking at an electrical system. We had to look at what are the actual volumetric flow rate once we got there of the river, because if it's too fast and it overloads the system, then it can cause disruption in the electrical. I mean, there was so many design requirements on this system. So I won't ever forget when we actually got it assembled and we got it into the water, and we're holding it in the water, and I got to see those students see their turbine working and see their design come to life and have that moment of accomplishment, like see that we did this and it works and it's gonna matter. And I think that is one of my most unforgettable moments of the Honduras trip.
We're putting the hydroelectric generator in the water, and this thing weighs close to 100 pounds. I mean, it's legitimately 70 to 80 pounds with everything on it. And it's bulky and it's awkward. You know, we're talking about probably 4 feet total in diameter. And it took 4 of us to manipulate it into the water, to get it into the water, and we've got like support brackets and everything. And finally we get out of the water and we're trying to figure out, okay, how are we gonna carry it up the side of this cliff and get it back up protected until we can work on it again tomorrow. Javier is probably the villager that made the most impression on me. I don't think I've ever seen anybody that was just so naturally strong. Javier takes it and he flips it upside down and puts it on his shoulder and carries it up the cliff, and we're all just kind of standing there in awe.
In Cola De Cajon, for this area, it's really pretty advanced. And they have seen a lot of people come through there. They were kind of used to seeing people come in and out, but they hadn't seen a group of engineering students come in and build these projects. And so you were really able to see the people in this village come alive. I'd never been on a trip like this before. You know, this trip was really spectacular.
It was truly a transformational experience for these students, but not just for them, but for the faculty involved. Because watching your students, it was like in this one semester we saw this change from someone who is educated to be an engineer to actual engineers. By the end of the semester, these guys are engineers, and you have a problem and they can figure out a way to solve it, because now they've solved problems where they had no information. And it was remarkable. So that part of it was, as an educator, it was the most rewarding part of the educational experience for me.
I could tell a lot of them grew in leadership, for sure, and in confidence. And you know, when they saw that it worked, and they saw that they could handle themselves, and they saw that they could adapt to problems that they didn't foresee coming, that's going to help them a lot in their professional lives. And it's the kind of experience that it's hard to produce in the classroom, to make that kind of thing happen, to give them a chance where there's real leadership and real consequences if they fail. Thankfully they didn't fail, and there's this huge boost that comes to them.
You plan and you prepare and you build certain projects, but you have a sense of flexibility as far as, well, I don't have that detailed exactly figured out, but I can worry about it when that time comes. In this aspect, when we studied abroad and building these projects, is you don't have room for that. Every detail has to be marked out, and every sense of perspective on your project has to be written out in a perfect form or fashion. Mainly because when you get there, if you don't have a part or piece, then your project is essentially done for. And so that planning process really pushed our minds and our projects to the next level, I feel like.
A lot of the time you really don't see the reason for learning this math, or the reason for doing the engineering. And then we got to take this class, which was really fulfilling to see, like, hey, all these things we've learned about the speeds that a generator should turn, or all these things we've learned in our other classes, we can apply that to make something that's actually going to help somebody, make something that's not just theoretical, not just a random design, but something that's going to better someone's life.
When I started off the trip, I was a die-hard civil engineer. I did not think I was ever going to switch, and I just didn't think I had any interest in it until going on this trip and seeing how mechanical engineering was applied in real-world applications. I saw how you can be making hydroelectric generators and water filtration systems.
It's just a week, you know, it just flies right by. But I think the impact that it has on them and the things that they do, I think it's really great, and I think that's one of the reasons why we do international travel. And I think the students' lives will be changed forever. And for me personally, I never get enough of it. And
I remember one of the friends that I made there, Milvia, asking me. She said, "So you guys came to fix the light?" And I thought, you know, that's why we might have thought we were coming, but we didn't. You know, we came. And we're really just transformed by the experiences that we had there with the projects. It was truly academically, it probably developed these students more than any experience that they've had. But then also emotionally and physically and mentally develop them in ways that we won't be able to measure.
Definitely. I would definitely say I'm a much better, more prepared engineer.
I'm very happy I made the trip. I think it helped me immensely for becoming an engineer and just being a well-rounded person.
I feel more like a real engineer from this experience. I think engineering faculty are always excited about opportunities that that remind us, why we do engineering in the first place.
I think the most meaningful thing for me and the most rewarding thing for me while we were there is that just to be able to see how excited the students were to be in that kind of a setting that was completely foreign to the vast majority of them. I mean, a good portion of them have never been on an airplane, never been outside of the state, much less in the middle of the jungle in Central America, to see the lessons that they learned and how they incorporated it, the effect that it had on their life. I mean, you could tell during the days that we were there, just through watching them, their facial expressions, just watching their eyes, it was life-changing for them.
Just the experience here itself can't really compare to the experience that we saw in Honduras. Mainly just because not only the cultural diversity, not being in your comfort zone, being in somebody else's realm.
Overall, I had a really great experience, and I hope that the department continues on with doing these special topics and traveling, because I think it's a great opportunity for engineers to go out there and see how engineering is applied. And it's really hard to get that from a classroom.
You learn about the real world applications. You don't just learn the math and science, you learn about how you get to use that math and science when you get into industry, and how you can use those to really develop technology and make it better. And that's one thing that I love about WT, is just having that personal interaction that the professors have here, that they kind of inspire you and drive you to be better than just another engineer, to be an engineer who's going to really change the world.
They're going to look for ways to be able to take their education, take their knowledge, take their expertise, and make the world a better place. They're going to be better engineers. They are going to be better citizens moving forward from this.
I think this experience with the students, with the design projects, with the opportunity to travel to a new place and to really meet them, to see them really for who they are, and then for them to have this self-realization of what they can accomplish and they can design. I would say this has truly been my most rewarding experience as an educator.